jack of diamonds with the devil close behind. We're gonna ride.
Going back to Webster Tarpley. Okay, Webster, my friend. We'll talk about your new book, by the way, that I should be carrying at the bookstore. We carry your two books on Obama and your book on 9/11 synthetic terror at Infowars.com. I should throw out, but the new one, Surviving the Cataclysm, you predicted this 10 years ago. It's republished and updated. I just love people that have a track record, and yours is so good. Webster,
Alex, just before we go into the question of the fascist corporate state, because it's really important for people to understand. The fascist corporate state is a state-sponsored compulsory cartel, and it means that Geithner and Summers have picked the winners. The winners are J.P. Morgan Chase, Goldman Sachs, and they're trying to save Citibank if they can, because that's Bob Rubin, who is the sort of the gray eminence of this entire clique. So they are going to run the General Motors bankruptcy in such a way as to save J.P. Morgan Chase, Citibank, Goldman Sachs, and sacrifice everybody else. And that's what people are screaming about, that the other groups, Oppenheimer and Stairway and a couple of these other hedge funds, have been sacrificed because they're not part of the state-sponsored compulsory cartel. But notice what's happening. Production goes down, wages go down, unemployment goes down, employment goes down, jobs get to be fewer because they're destroyed, but the fictitious paper claims of J.P. Morgan Chase and Citibank are propped up. That's the fascist corporate state. To call Obama a socialist is to do him a big favor. That makes him sound much nicer than he really is.
No, this is a complete hoax. This is a complete... I mean, let me be clear. I'm not... Exactly. This is a mass hoax to call this socialism. That's why the media says it every day, every night. In hundreds of publications, they print that headline that this is Marxism. This is just piracy. This is high seas, swashbuckling, knock us on the head, is it not?
Absolutely illegal. Now, you've probably seen the Greg Palast article, which I think is very useful. You could see all these right-wing characters are saying, yeah, the UAW has taken over everything. The UAW has given up guaranteed health care for shares of stock in Chrysler and General Motors that are going to be worthless. So the risk has been shifted to them. And as far as I understand, a $6 billion payment is immediately made to J.P. Morgan Chase and Citibank, so they are made whole. They get off with a whole coat.
And then they privatize the risk. They take taxpayer money, put it into stocks, float it out there, and then when it goes down the tubes, it doesn't matter. It just goes into thin air. But like you said, J.P. Morgan Chase, they got the cash up front.
And if you want to look at the real excesses, this is typical, right? We have the AIG payments from the TARP, right, from the bailout. So the TARP gave AIG $180 or $200 billion. Who got that money? Barclays Bank of Great Britain, $10 billion, $15 billion. Deutsche Bank of Germany, $10 to $15 billion. Société Générale of France, $10 to $15 billion. Union Bank of Switzerland, perhaps the most bankrupt of all the big zombie banks, another $10 to $15 billion. And Goldman Sachs, $10 to $15 billion.
And AIG, $180 billion.
Right. Well, the money was conduited through AIG.
To them.
And the centerpiece, of course, is this London hedge fund of AIG, which issued $3 trillion of derivatives, more than the gross national product of France. So that gives you precisely the key. If you got burned by a hedge fund selling derivatives, your next step is to outlaw hedge funds and to outlaw derivatives. We have these characters around Obama now talking about their plan to regulate derivatives. My plan to regulate derivatives is a shredder and a delete button. In other words, you get rid of them. You wipe them out. Not only are they worthless, they're like
black hole singularities. I mean, like you said, worthless. They have negative value.
The Rasputnik. You got to pay the mafia garbage men to come and take them away.
Unbelievable. Well, Webster, we're about to break a long segment coming up, but I've got to get into this with you. I know you're giving us solutions, and I agree with many of them. Let's talk about what is going to happen. They're clearly not going to change course. They're criminal. They're all in. They're going for broke. All their treasure is staked on this. Their blood, their name. They're going all out. The youth corps are marching on TV in red and black uniforms now. I don't know if you've seen this. I mean, we're now entering some type of strange Lovian, Brave New World mixed with Twilight Zone vortex, where I expect to see floating pink panthers any moment. So I want flying pigs here. I want to go over the worst case scenario, which it appears it is, as we go into hyper-stagflation and they don't do what should be done, what is going to happen? Because I think at this point, things are going to go down the tubes. How do we salvage something? Webster Tarpley, stay with us.
Do you understand how dark it is? How far down the line we are? How late it is?
All right, Webster, in the time we got with you, and I want to jam in some calls as well. I got to have you back up. Time just flies. I'll get you on for a couple hours. Plus, I know you just finished 2 books. One on the roots of this cartel and one on their modern activities. But as all this deteriorates faster and faster, and they still prance around saying globalism is the answer, when clearly their system of globalization engineered all of this, whether by hook or by crook, they're the progenitors of the problem that we're under. And then we have Geithner running around saying, don't worry, the dollar's safe, and the Chinese laugh at him. That's right. In the news. And then the dollar starts plunging even further. I tend to agree with you. I mean, I believe they engineered it because they have their own IMF World Bank documents, but it's kind of like them. Delusional liars tend to start believing their own bull, their own horse crap.
Correct.
And I really think they've lost control, and these psychopathic thieves have endangered the entire shooting match.
I think that's true. I think we're headed probably towards some kind of acute turn of this crisis. In other words, we've been living in this fool's paradise with a mugs rally, a sucker rally going on in Wall Street. But notice, the state of California is collapsing. General Motors is bankrupt. Chrysler is bankrupt. The Toyota car sales are down 40% in the most recent month. Unemployment continues to be very, very high. In other words, about 500,000 jobs lost per month, every month. So that's going to be a disaster. Now, the question is, when do you reach the breaking point on Obama? Historically speaking, the previous case of the 100% Wall Street puppet president, owned by the Trilateral Commission and Brzezinski and Rockefellers and so forth, was, of course, Carter. Carter reached his peak right about now, so to speak, the end of April, beginning of May, mid-May 1977, and after that, Carter began to slide into a decline. And I think there are signs that that's happening with Obama. The left liberals in particular. If you happen to see this Campaign for America's Future, this Boros Sage, Kushner, Vanden Heuvel group, the left liberals, sort of the limousine liberal, Learjet liberal types, right, merging into parts of the Obama administration, they're very uncomfortable with this idea of the $13 trillion going to Wall Street and a few $100 billion, the crumbs, going to the rest of us. So I think there's a big problem there. The question is, if you're going to attack Obama, you've got to attack him from the left. This is the big thing. Look at Obama. He loves to play himself off against Limbaugh, against Newt Gingrich.
No, their own memos say that. They say we want to make this about like running for office against Limbaugh. Limbaugh isn't running jack squat. Limbaugh loves the attention, but he knows they're using him as a distraction.
And, of course, as an egomaniac, he can't get enough of it. The critique that really hurts Obama is a left-wing critique. Now, you got to develop some idea of an alternative policy, and it can't be, cut the budget and let everything liquidate into a, general bankruptcy, because that's just going to kill people.
No, they've already hyperinflated things to the point we need to arrest the bankers and direct all this fiat stuff into real industry so we get something.
Let me just say one sign of life, and I'm surprised by this, but Michael Moore, right? Michael Moore, he's been around for a while. People know him. If you look at his essay on General Motors, you will see that there are signs of life there. In other words, it's tinged with this gangrene economy stuff. It's tinged with this alternative energy claptrap. But what he says is you've got to go back to the 1942 conversion of General Motors to war production, and then the reconversion in 1945-46 back into civilian production. And what could you reconvert those factories to do, right? Because you've got unemployed workers, 14 more General Motors factories closing, dozens of factories now idle, hundreds of thousands of unemployed auto workers. What could you build? And he says, well, you could build bullet trains. Now, bullet trains would be the Japanese trains, but of course they're obsolete now. We want maglev. We want magnetic levitation railways where you go from Los Angeles to New York in 3 hours in a rail car.
Instead, they're going to build cruddy local slow trains to nowhere with people so poor they can't even afford to get on them, instead of super trains to cities where you say, oh, I'm going to shoot down to Dallas on the hour train instead of 4 hours in a car. But
Absolutely.
they won't do it, man. They will not do it because it's a good idea.
This is what you got to fight for. In other words, I'm very encouraged to see that some of these ideas are floating around. So Michael Moore says you can build mass transit, you can build maglev, and then he says alternative energy. He wants to build windmills. Well, the windmills are crazy. Build nuclear reactors. Build 100 high-temperature
let's back that up. Let's back that up. You can't build windmills because for the amount of power they generate and their cost, there's not a way to transfer the power without power loss. For those that don't know, power lines lose power. So the substations to hold that power are too cost prohibitive from the wind centers of the country to deliver it to major megacities. Now, wind is good in a localized small town setting.
Well, it can be used for specialties when there's no other alternative. But generally speaking, you're going to put more energy into the windmill than you're ever going to get out of it. So there are some places where you need that kind of thing. But as a base load approach to an industrial economy, it's a bad joke.
It's not a primary driver. But listen, before we get out of time, and I know you want to get into solutions, Web.